Sequence 2. So what we learned from sequence 1 was that we need to first determine what our islands of information are. So that happens early on. The next thing that we want to do is to determine what are the words that are the important semantical words that will help the message to become more impactful. Okay, so as we think about developing the islands, you also want to think about where the islands go. And putting negative space between the islands early on allows the islands to grow independently, and they grow toward each other as opposed to starting in the upper left corner and growing into the space. This allows the islands to have more identity and a little bit more integrity because you are now playing around with the identity of the island separately. And so you can work with your hierarchy and with your semantics and with your syntax within each island, allowing the islands then to hold the composition together, allowing the negative space to get your eye to jump from island to island to island. So those are the three most important things in terms of the structure of the project. Once you have the islands figured out, you can then create a little bit more identity and then let the islands grow into each other. As you play around with the impact of the semantics, you start to play around with the effect of type treatments. And type treatments can then graphically enhance that semantic meaning. As well, you have the choice of playing around with as many typefaces as you want. Now that's a lot of rope, and I want you to be careful with that because you can kill yourself by having too many typefaces going on. A better idea would be to find typefaces that have a big family, a lot of options in terms of weight, a lot of options in terms of style, and play around with perhaps 2 or 3 typefaces with large families that give you a lot of opportunity for hierarchy and playing with emphasis and de-emphasis without getting too crazy. That being said, you also have color, you also have type treatment, and you also have imagery. So you can keep things simple. This particular message is a relatively simple message, rather simple for part 2, but my preference would be if you pick something, if you're having trouble keeping a more complex quote organized, if you will, a simpler quote might lend itself towards a better successful outcome. So I would rather see something more complex than than this one, more like the first one, but the idea is there still. So what do you do with your imagery and what do you do with color? It's up to you. It can be as complex or as simple as you want, and you don't even necessarily need to do anything more than add some color to your text. But it gives you an opportunity to play around with a lot of possibilities. Okay. Type treatments like outlining or putting textures in the background using a word as a mask and putting an imagery behind that. Those are all possibilities. Okay. Now this is a neat progression, but it's a little simple. So again, if you're feeling intimidated by a more complex message, a simpler message might give you a better chance for success. In this case, bringing in the image as a graphical stylized element and gradually bringing it into focus, that was kind of a cool idea. I sort of like that. I think that there were some possibilities for transparency and so on that might have made this a slightly more layered composition, and certainly the designer has chosen to finally incorporate that, but it could have been done a little sooner, right? Right here, for example, the type is still getting pretty heavy, and a little transparency on there would have probably helped a little bit to kind of lighten things up a little bit. especially considering it's a pretty simple quote. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about for sequence 2. Okay, you have the opportunities. I always see the word and then I can use it in my lecture. But you have the opportunities for all of the things we had in sequence 1: scale and style and overlap, transparency, and blends. But now you have the opportunity for color, multiple typefaces. You don't have to start with any typeface. You can start with any typeface that you want, and you can add as many effects or blends or masks or whatever you want. Again, there's a lot of rope in this project, and so it can turn into a real mess if you're not careful. So if you are feeling intimidated by a complex message, you can go simpler. I would suggest trying something complex, and if it's not working, then go back. Okay, so lots to play with, lots to do, lots of rope, lots of fun. Cool.